Do you by any chance think today's tech is cool? Then you should wait till you see what we had in the 80s. From cassette tapes to clunky phones and pencil-powered rewinds, these everyday items were once the peak of convenience. But now, Gen Z wouldn't even recognize them. Whether you lived through it or just love a good throwback, get ready for 25 things that people used daily in the 1980s. Some were genius, some were pretty weird, but best believe it, all of them are guaranteed to blow your mind. It's Memory Surge, my name is Kevin, and we reveal the 25 everyday items from the 1980s that Gen Z has never seen. Let's get to it, right after you subscribe, of course.
Sony introduces the only cassette player as small as a cassette case.
Cassette tapes. Before Spotify playlists and Bluetooth speakers, music lovers in the 80s had cassette tapes. They were little plastic rectangles that held magnetic tape inside, which stored music or voice recordings. You'd pop one into a tape player, press play, and let it roll. However, if you wanted to skip a song, forget it. There was no fast scan preview. You had to rewind or fast forward, blindly guessing where the next track started, and if the tape got tangled, you had to get a pencil to manually twist it back into place. Also, making a mixtape for someone was a big deal. It was basically a DIY love letter.
Sony introduces the only cassette player as small as a cassette case.
Walkman. The Sony Walkman was one of the best inventions to have ever come out in the 1980s. If you were lucky enough to own one, you could listen to your favorite cassette tapes on the go, like walking to school, riding the bus, or just chilling outside. It was about the size of a small sandwich and came with wired headphones that sat right on your ears. No Bluetooth, no touchscreens, just big clunky buttons. Play, stop, rewind, fast forward. You had to flip the tape halfway through to hear the rest of the album. But the freedom to listen privately, wherever you wanted, that was revolutionary. Rotary phones. Rotary phones were basically the slow-motion cousins of smartphones. To make a call, you didn't tap a screen. You literally spun a dial for each number. You'd stick your finger into a hole that matched the number you wanted, rotate it all the way around, and let it click back into place. It took patience and accuracy. If you messed up one digit, you had to start all over again. No caller ID, no texting, no apps, just you and that satisfying click, click, click sound. These phones were usually heavy, had a curly cord, and were often bolted to the kitchen wall. The sound, though, was that there was little to no privacy. Everyone interested could listen to your business, at least your side of it. Boomboxes. If the 1980s had a soundtrack, it blasted out of a boombox. These were big, boxy, portable stereos with massive speakers and a cassette deck. Carrying one on your shoulder makes you look instantly cool. In those days, you would find boomboxes with breakdancers and in street corners. They had AM/FM radios, big silver knobs, and sometimes flashing lights. You could play music loud enough for the whole block to hear. Some models even let you record straight from the radio or make mixtapes. Boomboxes had no business with being subtle. They were bold and proud. They brought people together before earbuds separated us all into our own little audio cocoons. VHS tapes. VHS tapes were the kings of home entertainment before streaming and Blu-ray. These chunky, black plastic rectangles held hours of movies or TV shows on a long strip of magnetic tape inside. To watch a movie, you'd slide the tape into a VCR, hit play, and wait for the familiar fuzzy screen to clear up. If you rented a tape and didn't rewind it to the beginning, the next person would have to do it manually. Fast-forwarding or rewinding took time, and there were no skip buttons or scene selections. If you wanted to rewatch your favorite part, you would need to get comfy, as you'll be holding that remote for a while. Still, there was a thrill in owning your favorite movies on VHS. VCRs was the machine that brought movies into your living room. It worked hand in hand with VHS tapes, letting you watch and even record shows right off live TV. There was no Netflix, but it was not a problem. You pop a blank tape into the VCR, set the timer, and record your favorite soap opera or Saturday morning cartoon. Some families became pros at labeling tapes and organizing home-recorded collections, but these things were not user-friendly. Programming the timer was like solving a puzzle, and the flashing 1200 on the screen became a running joke because hardly anyone could set the clock. Nonetheless, VCRs were the heart of movie nights in the 80s. TVs with dials and no remote. Back in the 1980s, changing the channel meant getting up. Yes, physically standing up and turning a dial on the TV. There were usually two big knobs, one for channels 2 to 13 and another for the higher UHF channels. You'd hear that satisfying click, click, click as you turned it, searching for something to watch. No remotes, no voice commands. If you were the youngest in the house, guess what? You were the remote. TV sets were also heavy and boxy with wood paneling, and the screen had a slight curve. Sometimes you'd need to adjust the antenna, which were called rabbit ears, just right to get a clear picture. And when there was static, you'd smack the side of the TV like a pro. Floppy disks. Long before cloud storage and USB were a thing, we had floppy disks, the original save buttons. These square, thin pieces of plastic held your school assignments, game files, or important work documents. The name came from the original version being literally floppy, though the 3.5-inch versions that most 80s kids remember had a harder shell. You'd insert one into a computer slot with a satisfying click. But don't expect massive storage. These things could only hold about 1.44 megabytes, barely enough for one photo today. If you lost one or accidentally bent it, game over. Floppy disks also needed to be labeled by hand, so your desk was probably cluttered with them. Despite their limitations, they were a tech revolution at the time. Pagers, beepers. When phones were still something people only saw in sci-fi movies, pagers or beepers were the go-to way to get someone's attention. Doctors, business people, and even teenagers in the 80s wore them clipped to their belts like badges of honor. If someone needed you, they'd dial your pager number and send a numeric message, usually just their phone number. Your pager would beep or vibrate, and you'd hustle to the nearest payphone to call them back. That's right, you had to find a phone to return the call. Some fancy models could even display short messages or codes like 143, which meant "I love you." It wasn't real-time texting, but it was the first taste of mobile communication. Of course, Gen Z would lose their minds if they had to use something like that today. Phone books. A phone book was basically the Google search of the 80s, only it came in the form of a heavy, paper-filled brick. These thick books were delivered to your doorstep and included the phone numbers of everyone in your city or town. Residential listings were in the white pages, while businesses were in yellow pages. If you needed a plumber, a pizza place, or your classmate's home number, you flipped through the phone book. No screen, no search bar, just your finger running down endless names and numbers. You'd often find random doodles or grocery lists scribbled in the margins. And if you couldn't reach someone, no voicemail, no texting, you gotta try your luck again later. Encyclopedias. Before Wikipedia existed, learning something meant pulling down a massive encyclopedia from the bookshelf. These were thick, hardcover books, usually a whole set arranged from A to Z. If you had an assignment about volcanoes, you would look in volume V. And if you were curious about ancient Egypt, then you would flip to E. The pages were full of text, diagrams, and the occasional color photo. Schools, libraries, and homes often had entire shelves dedicated to these encyclopedias. Updating information meant buying a new edition, nothing like quick edits. If you had a report due, you'd spread these books out across the table like a mini research lab. While Gen Z can look up anything instantly, something was rewarding about physically flipping pages and learning old school style. Answering machines with mini cassettes. In the 80s, if you weren't home to pick up the phone, your answering machine took the call. These devices were little boxes that connected to your landline and recorded messages on tiny cassette tapes. When someone called and you didn't answer, your pre-recorded message would play, "Hi, we're not home. Leave a message," and the caller would speak after the beep. You'd come home, hit play, and listen to each message. No transcription, no visual voicemail. If the tape ran out or broke, tough luck. Deleting a message meant rewinding and recording over it. Sometimes you'd catch hilarious background noises or someone yelling, "Is this thing on?" into the phone. Answering machines made phone calls feel more personal and kind of exciting, as you never knew what message might be waiting. Disposable cameras. Long before selfies and Instagram, taking pictures on the go meant using a disposable camera. They were cheap, plastic cameras that were sold preloaded with film and had no screen, no zoom, and no retakes. You would snap a photo and hope for the best, but you wouldn't see it until the film was developed. After you've used up the roll, usually 24 or 36 shots, you'd drop the camera off at a photo lab or pharmacy, wait a few days, and pick up your printed photos. Some shots were perfect, others were blurry or had someone blinking, but that was part of the fun. Disposable cameras were super popular for vacations, parties, and school trips. You didn't worry about filters, you just captured the moment. For Gen Z, the concept might seem like a gamble, but there was a special magic in not knowing what you got until that envelope of prints came back. Rewinding tape with a pencil. Back in the day, if your cassette tape got eaten or tangled up, you needn't panic. You would just grab a pencil. Yes, a regular number. 2 pencil was your rewind tool. You'd stick it into one of the tape reel holes and spin it to win the tape back into place. It was almost therapeutic, really. This trick saved you from wasting your tape deck motor or batteries and kept your favorite mixtape alive a little longer. Every cassette fan knew the feeling of gently fixing a tape and praying it would still play without warping the sound. Car ashtrays. In the 1980s, it was totally normal for every car to come with a built-in ashtray. Usually tucked into the dashboard or back of the armrest, these little trays were made for smokers to flick ashes and stub out cigarettes while driving. Many even had a lighter built in. You'd push it in, wait a few seconds, and it would pop out red hot, ready to light up. No one blinked twice at lighting a smoke on the freeway. Today, that sounds wild, but back then, smoking was literally part of the ride. Some parents even used the ashtray for loose change or storing small junk once they stopped smoking. Now that smoking in cars has become rare, these ashtrays are basically extinct. Gen Z drivers probably won't ever see one unless they inherit a very old ride or stumble upon one in a classic car show. Typewriters. Before laptops and tablets, there was the mighty typewriter, a machine that clicked, clacked, and dinged its way through school reports, letters, and manuscripts. You'd load in a sheet of paper, hit the keys, and hear that tap, tap, tap sound. No delete button here. If you made a mistake, you either used whiteout or started over, and every line ended with a satisfying ding that told you it was time to slide the carriage back. It was loud, mechanical, and oddly satisfying. Some had ribbons that needed replacing, and others were electric, but the charm was the same. For writers, it felt like serious business, experiencing your thoughts going straight from your brain to paper with no distractions. To Gen Z, it will undoubtedly feel like typing in the Stone Age. Atari game consoles. Before PlayStation, Xbox, or even Nintendo dominated living rooms, the Atari was king. Released in the late 70s but huge throughout the 80s, the Atari 2600 brought video games home for the first time. The graphics were simple, colorful blocks bouncing around the screen, but the excitement was real. Games like Pong, Asteroids, and Pitfall had kids glued to the TV. You plugged in large cartridges and used a joystick with a single red button to play. That was just one button, and yet it was hours of fun. The graphics might make Gen Z laugh now, but Atari paved the way for everything that came after. Cable TV boxes with slide switches. In the 1980s, if you had cable TV, chances are you had a box with sliding switches sitting on top of your television. No digital menus or remotes, just rows of clicky switches that manually changed the channel. The box was usually brown or black and made a little clunk sound with every slide. Some even had a long cord attached so you could switch channels from your couch, which was pretty high-tech at the time. If a premium channel was scrambled, you'd stare at the fuzzy screen, hoping it might magically come in. There were no on-screen guides. You had to use a paper TV guide to know what was on. Still, it felt futuristic compared to antennas. These days, Gen Z has hundreds of channels to choose from and streaming apps. They will never understand the struggle. Handheld electronic games. Before mobile games and Nintendo Switch, we had Tiger handheld games. They were small, plastic, battery-powered devices with a single game on them. They were cheap, loud, and wildly popular in the 80s and early 90s. The graphics were made of pre-drawn images that blinked on and off. No animation, no smooth movement, just flickering characters. Each game had its own sound effects and controls, usually just 2 or 3 buttons. Whether it was Street Fighter, Sonic, or a racing game, young people played it again and again until their thumbs were sore. They were perfect for road trips, long lines, or sneaking under your desk in school. They might seem primitive now, but back then, they were everything. For Gen Z, it's hard to imagine a world with no app store and no saved progress, but Tiger handhelds were the perfect pocket-sized distraction for an entire generation. TV Guide magazine. Before streaming and smart TVs, finding out what was on TV required a little effort, and that meant grabbing the TV Guide magazine. Every week, this compact booklet hit grocery store shelves and mailboxes, packed with listings for every channel, every show, and every time slot. You'd flip through to plan your evening, highlight your favorite shows, and sometimes even read celebrity interviews or behind-the-scenes stories. For many families, TV Guide sat right next to the remote. That's if you were lucky enough to have one. There were no on-screen guides or algorithmic suggestions, just printed grids and a whole lot of squinting. Gen Z might ask, why not just check your phone? But back then, this magazine was your entertainment planner. If you're missing an episode, too bad, you had to wait for a rerun. Rolodex. The Rolodex was the original contact list, long before phones stored hundreds of names. It was a spinning wheel of index cards that sat proudly on office desks, holding all your important contacts like name, address, phone number, maybe even a note or two. To find someone, you turned the dial until you landed on their card. Simple, effective, and strangely satisfying. Business people treated it like gold. If you made it into someone's Rolodex, you were officially in their network. Today, it's been replaced by digital address books and contact apps. But back in the 80s, losing your Rolodex would have been like losing your whole LinkedIn. Carbon copy paper. Ever wondered why people say CC me in emails? It comes from carbon copy paper, a thin, inky sheet used to duplicate handwritten or typed documents. In the 80s, carbon paper was everywhere. Banks, offices, restaurants, even your parents' checkbook. When someone filled out a receipt or invoice, a second and sometimes third copy was created instantly underneath, thanks to the carbon layer between the sheets. It was messy, often left ink smudges on your hands, and if you pressed too lightly, the copy didn't show. But it got the job done. Businesses relied on it to keep records long before printers or cloud storage were a thing. Gen Z is used to email receipts, but back then, if you needed a copy, it meant actual carbon copies. Travel agents for booking flights. Booking a flight used to be a job for professional travel agents. You couldn't just pull out your phone and scroll through airline apps. In the 80s, you walked into a travel agency, told them your destination, and they'd handle the rest. Flights, hotels, car rentals, even maps. Their offices had wall posters of exotic getaways and desks filled with brochures. They'd call airlines directly, sometimes wait on hold for ages, and print your itinerary on thick paper. They knew the best deals, hidden fees, and how to book complicated trips. It felt official and sometimes even glamorous. Gen Z has never needed a middleman to book a trip, but travel agents were once your personal Google, Kayak, and TripAdvisor rolled into one. Film canisters. Before the days of camera rolls and cloud storage, capturing memories meant using film canisters. Those little black or gray plastic containers with a roll of 35mm film inside. You'd load the film into a camera carefully, close the back, and hope it was in right. Each roll gave you about 24 or 36 shots, no previews, no retakes. You had to wait to see your photos, sometimes for days, as they were developed in a photo lab. The canisters themselves were often reused for storing small items like coins, pins, or even spices. Losing one could ruin a vacation's worth of memories. Gen Z is used to snapping hundreds of pics and deleting what doesn't look perfect, but back then, every photo counted. Clunky, corded landline phones with coiled cables. Oh, the classic corded landline phone. It usually sat on a desk or was mounted on the wall with a long, tangled, coiled cord connecting the handset to the base. Making a call meant standing close or stretching the cord into the next room for privacy, dragging it under doors or around furniture. There was no caller ID, you had to pick it up before knowing who it was, and if someone was already on the phone, you had to wait. These phones came in avocado green, beige, or rotary styles that took forever to dial. If you dropped the handset, that satisfying clang echoed through the house. To Gen Z, it probably looks like a prop from a retro movie. But to 80s families, it was the link to friends, gossip, emergencies, and teenage crushes. What do you think? Which of these have you seen or even used before? Let me know in the comments.